This International Women's Day, we highlight and celebrate 5 amazing women who have the most inspirational story ever. But here's the thing, we haven't heard from them before. And they're from a generation that may not be with us for too long. So this generation of women are the real heroes for me. So let me tell you a little more about them. South Asian migration to the UK increased through the 1950s, 60s and 70s, with migrants coming from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Kenya and Uganda. While the UK offered work, there was no cultural infrastructure in place for Asian communities. Many of the women who left families in other continents to join their husbands or to leave difficult situations for a better life spoke no English and knew nothing about England, except the stories that it was a country that was paved with gold. On arrival, they didn't find the gold, but found opportunity with struggle and hardship. Despite this, the grit and determination got them to where they are today, creating other independent and strong women after them. So as part of our International Women's Day special, we decided to share some of those stories with you. Naturally, there were many more stories that we could have shared, but sadly, this generation have either faded memories or have too many painful memories to share their truths to an audience. Many, unfortunately, are not even among us. But those that are, let us celebrate them and shine a light on their phenomenal journeys and use them as our starting point to celebrate. So let me introduce you to some of our real heroes. Pritpal Kaur is aged 70. She's a famous cake baker and face mask professional. She's been on furlough since the first lockdown. She loves her job at Harrods and was devastated when lockdown happened. However, she wasn't undeterred for very long and turned her hand to making eggless cakes for the COVID heroes and would surprise people just as a way to say thank you for all they were doing for others. Some of the places she dropped these cakes to were the NHS, fire service, police, homeless shelter, post office and many other places. Pritpal has 4 siblings, one of which died from alcohol abuse. She comes from a family who were traditionally very chilled and relaxed. She describes her younger days as fun and memorable. Pritpal came to the UK in the 1960s on a ship with her family. She didn't know the language and it was a very different way of life. Having grown up on a farm and coming to a country where you have to work really hard, life certainly wasn't easy. Life was different in the UK. She felt it was easier in India because you're free to do what you like, no worries about paying bills. Her uncle was one of the first people in Southall called Pritpal Singh, who had a shop and wouldn't charge those who couldn't afford it. He left a legacy behind and is remembered as one of the nicest people. When she was younger, her father used to teach her to drive. Growing up, she remembers living in Southall, known as Little India, on the popular street Western Road, and she explains how those days it was safe to go out late. You didn't feel worried or anxious like parents do today. Pritpal has worked all her life, even after nearly a year on furlough. However, work hasn't always been pleasant. In the past, she has worked at organisations where she's faced some indirect racism, but it never stopped her from working hard. Her motto in life is serve others and always help people if you can. Be kind and love everyone. As a Sikh, she lives by the 3 principles of Sikhism: meditate, earn an honest living and give back to others through seva, which is selfless service. She still remembers when she came to the UK. She said life was simpler then, no technology and people had time for one another. She finds a fast-paced life today is not for her. She misses the farm life. However, she might like the farm life, but she also loves her iPad and is on it every day looking up new recipes and is the best in eggless recipes. Aside from farm life and technology, Pritpal has also won competitions in swimming, running, and recently learnt to ride a bike at the age of 70. She is on a mission to stay fit and active, but also to encourage other women to do some form of exercise. While on furlough, Pritpal hasn't sat still. She has made face masks for the vulnerable in COVID from old material and tote bags. She has also been baking a lot during lockdown and knitted jumpers and scarves. Although she does see that times are really changing and things are very different from her childhood, she doesn't regret coming to the UK, but does miss her life in India, sitting around the fire and going out for long walks. And the life without technology, of course, where people had more time for one another. Her message to the younger generation today: Hanifa Aslam has been living in Bradford since May 1970. The 77-year-old was originally born in Punjab, India, but due to the partition, she, her mother and two sisters were thrown out of their home and ended up travelling by ship to join their father in Kenya, Nairobi. She then later moved to the UK. Hanifa's father had left India to join his elder brother to work in the railways in Kenya before the partition. With his wife and daughters joining him, he chose to permanently settle in Kenya. Hanifa had two children with Aslam, a girl and a boy. However, despite having everything, a decent lifestyle, Hanifa was unhappy. After spending a couple of weeks in the UK, Hanifa travelled back to Kenya, but things had got worse when she reached her husband. This time, however, Hanifa thought enough was enough and decided to pluck up the courage, forsaking all customs and cultural expectations of a dutiful South Asian wife, packed 2 suitcases and headed with her 2 children to the UK, this time permanently. Hanifa managed to get herself a small house not too far from her sister's place and spent the first year focusing on her children. Hanifa seemed determined to be independent and not rely on anyone, and so the next step for her was to get a job. Luck was on her side, as her Scottish neighbours were looking for a babysitter for their daughter. Hanifa got a job working in a factory doing section work, sewing three-piece suits. She worked there for 8 years till the factory closed down. However, was lucky to get a job at the then well-established SR Gents. Hanifa spent a glorious 14 years at Seymour Shirts until they too closed their doors. Hanifa is a hard-working woman and found she needed to be kept busy, and eventually found herself another job as a dinner lady. Even when not working, Hanifa used to keep herself busy by going to community centres and doing courses and meeting like-minded women. Her 2 children went on to graduate at university with degrees and successfully found secure jobs. Daughter Shabina is now also doing a PhD, while her son is married with 2 children and after a long career in Saudi Arabia has returned to the UK and works for the local authority. Thanks to Hanifa's grit, determination and bravery to leave behind a toxic marriage and arrive in a country which was unfamiliar to her, she was able to make a better life for herself in the UK. She started from scratch, worked hard, and the results of her sacrifices and efforts is a better future for her children. Hanifa's message to the current generation is simply to learn not to lean on or rely on anyone. Learn to fight alone and victory will be yours, she says. Well, Hanifa, we absolutely salute that. Razia Bibi is a great-grandma of 15 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. She speaks Swahili, Urdu, Punjabi, Gujarati and English. And despite being 79 years old, has an amazing memory and still as fierce as she describes herself during her early years. Razia was born in 1942 in Jammu, Kashmir. Her father, grandfather and great-grandfather all served in the British Army, with her great-grandfather being a direct bodyguard of Queen Victoria. Razia was only 5 years old when the partition happened in 1947, where along with her parents and 2 sisters they moved to Sialkot, the Pakistan side. A few years later, she and her family moved to Kenya, as there was a need for workers, and with Kenya developing, the family thought to seek better opportunities there. Razia married in Kenya, but had a difficult time with her husband and in-laws. Razia certainly had some tough times, but love came knocking on her door and she remarried. Her second husband then invited her to move to the UK, and around 1977 Razia, along with her 5 children, took a flight to London. On arrival, Razia remembers the cold weather and the panic that no one had arrived at the airport to receive her and her children. She managed to get a taxi to take her to the address she had of her sister-in-law in Nottingham, only later to discover that shortly after she left the airport, her husband had arrived to receive her. Such were the days then, where you didn't have mobile phones or access to telephones to inform one another of delays. It took Razia a few years to adjust to life in the UK, and when she did, she really took off. Razia started her own business and declares that she was the very first lady tailor in Bradford. She said it was difficult to get Asian dresses in those days, so she used to get fabric from the warehouse and cut them to make dresses. She then used to go door to door to sell them. Well, it's no wonder Razia's friends have nicknamed her Razia Sultan after the famous first Muslim female ruler in Delhi. Razia, may you continue to rule your little world. Kulwant Kaur Pritpal is aged 70, from Leeds. She was the first female Pradhan, which is the leader of the Gurdwara, at the Guru Nanak Sikh temple. This is unheard of and something truly to celebrate. Born in Kanwara, Hoshiarpur district, Punjab, she loved India. Life was simple, easy, and there was a lot of love. Families are together, they have time for one another. Her grandfather was in the 23rd Sikh Regiment and fought in World War I. Kulwant came to the UK in 1973, aged just 21. She got married in Wolverhampton, and after the birth of her first child, moved to Leeds, where her husband was working. She raised 4 children, went to evening classes to learn English and an NVQ level 2 in admin at the Leeds College of Technology. She lived a fairly normal life and brought up 4 kids working part-time, working for Leeds City Council. Being the youngest sibling and having 4 older brothers, her parents never made her feel any different as a girl. And in 2015, she became a committee member, and in 2017, she was voted by the committee to become Pradhan. What should have been a 6-month stint ended up being a 2-year job because the committee was so impressed with the work of Kulwant and the increase in Sangha attending that they asked her to stay on. Kulwant was very much involved in doing Sewa at the Gurdwara and the community. She started learning to read Gurbani, prayer, Shabd Kirtan, religious hymns. Most Gurdwaras, like any other religious places, tend to have men in these roles, but Kulwant changed this, and she has inspired many other women, especially the younger generation. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Kulwant did face some challenges in being the first woman leader, but the strength and determination that she had, she overcame it. When she arrived in Leeds, there were less than a handful of South Asian families in a predominantly white area, but all the neighbours were kind and respectful and made her feel welcome. Kulwant has faced many challenges, with the biggest one being coming to the UK and settling in a new city, not knowing the language and being away from her family and the in-laws. She herself has had the vaccine and now is encouraging others to take it. More recently, Kulwant has been helping to dispel any of the myths and fake news that has been going on around the South Asian community regarding vaccine hesitancy. She herself has had the vaccine. Selfless service is one of the key principles for Sikhs. She wants the youngsters of today to remember God, give back and earn an honest living. Be kind, humble and always listen to others. She is inspired by her children and her faith. Her message to the younger generation is, please get involved in selfless service. Come to the Gurdwara and encourage others to come as well. Seva is so important and we should never forget our roots. Akhtar Rashid made her journey from Karachi to Bradford in 1962 at the age of 29. She came to join her husband who had arrived in 1961. During the early 60s, many South Asians who had arrived to the UK used to house share and bed share. Men who used to work in the mills used to work shifts, so according to the shifts they worked, they would take it in turns to sleep on the bed. Akhtar's husband didn't want her to live in such conditions and therefore decided not to ask her to come and join him till he was the owner of his own home. He managed to save £400 and borrow £100 to buy his first house. While the house was the perfect size for him and his wife, Akhtar confesses she wasn't too pleased with the outside toilet. Akhtar claims she didn't have much family or relatives when she first arrived in Bradford. But making friends wasn't that difficult, especially with people of the same background, because there was always a connection to the motherland, which broke the ice easily. But also where her husband worked, he knew a lot of people, so they had a good social circle, and this helped the first few years get by. 6 years later, Akhtar returned to Pakistan to adopt her sister's son. When she came back to the UK, she decided that after taking him to school, she would go to work, something which her husband didn't agree with. Akhtar never had the opportunity to study while in Pakistan. As a young girl, she studied for a couple of years and then was told that she didn't need to pursue further because what are girls going to do with an education? For this reason, she never learned English. But this didn't stop her from working in a factory with English-speaking employers. Akhtar worked as a machinist and spent 18 years in the same firm till she reached retirement age. Akhtar thinks working for 18 years isn't a long time. Even today, with lifestyle changes and more people preferring to eat out or order their food in, Akhtar admits she was never a fan of eating out. Looking back at her life, Akhtar is happy with the way her life has panned out. She says she never experienced any kind of racism and is grateful for everything she has today. She has 4 grandchildren and her son is doing exceptionally well with his own garage business. When asked about what advice she would give to today's youth, she jokes, "I won't be able to give them any advice, as they probably wouldn't listen to an old person like me." However, Akhtar does feel that today's generation seem less careful with their expenditure and seem to have much more freedom, which can get them into the wrong crowds.